August 19th, 1939, 10:17 p.m., the Kremlin, Moscow. The night is dense, almost palpable. A recent downpour has left the granite paving slick and reflective. The Moskva River meanders silently under a thin veil of mist. Atop the Kremlin's iconic towers, the red stars blur in the damp air, their glow diffused. At the Spa Sky Gate, NKVD guards stand unyielding in their heavy coats, Mosin, Nagant rifles held ready. The long 7.62mm barrels gleam faintly, their wooden stocks still wet, bayonets catching the weak yellow light. A rifle's accurate range is several hundred meters, but tonight their primary function is a stark reminder. Every threshold has a guardian. Inside the echoing stone corridors, Vyacheslav Molotov moves with haste, his gaze fixed ahead. He carries a folder, its contents sealed under a layer of red wax. Each page within represents a different facet of fear. Fear of Germany's growing power, fear of the unpredictable West, fear of being drawn into a devastating war for which the USSR is woefully unprepared. He has just finished reading another dispiriting report. Negotiations with Britain and France remain deadlocked over a contentious issue of transit rights through Poland and Romania. Western delegations are consistently late, speak with agonizing slowness, and, crucially, lack the authority to make decisive commitments, a frustrating pattern widely noted during the summer talks of 1939. In the adjacent room, Joseph Stalin awaits. He eschews the grand hall, preferring a more intimate chamber with a long, low table that seems to absorb sound, lending voices a weighty gravitas. He raises his pipe, watching the smoke curl and dissipate. On the wall hangs a map of Eastern Europe, a region of crucial strategic importance. A gray swathe stretches from the Baltic Sea towards the Black Sea, the historic buffer lands of the old Russian Empire. Territory Stalin believes must be brought back into the fold to keep the looming threat of war as safe distance from Moscow, a belief echoed in numerous historical accounts. Molotov lays out the papers. He is uncharacteristically blunt. Britain and France are unwilling to concede. They seek to tie our hands while offering nothing in return. Stalin taps the tabletop, a steady, metronome-like rhythm. He offers no argument, simply inquiring, "Any further communication from the Germans?" Molotov nods. Berlin has been signaling through diplomatic back channels and trade envoys, offering a non-aggression pact and, crucially, a secret additional protocol that would delineate spheres of influence. The summer of 1939 is a desperate race against time, with every clock seemingly running at the wrong speed. Hitler desires Poland, but is desperate to avoid a ruinous two-front war. He needs the USSR to remain neutral. Stalin understands this perfectly. He, too, needs time. The Red Army is still reeling from the purges that decimated its officer corps. The army size is immense, but its leadership has been critically undermined. Stalin aims to buy at least a year, even a few precious months, to rebuild its strength, and if possible, to reclaim territories once held by the Tsars, pushing the Soviet frontier westward to encompass eastern Poland, the Baltic states, Bessarabia, and parts of Finland. On this tense night, the momentous decision takes shape with the sharpness of a thin blade. There are no raised voices, no outbursts of anger, only cold, calculated arithmetic. 2 days later, August 21st, 1939, 11:36 p.m., Tempelhof Airport, Berlin. The air is dry, the wind light, and the clouds hang low, a somber ash gray. Joachim von Ribbentrop boards a 4-engine Condor, its black-painted fuselage gleaming ominously under the green runway lights. He carries a thick leather briefcase and a telegram bearing Hitler's signature, a formal invitation to fly to Moscow immediately to sign the proposed pact. Ribbentrop is less assured than his outward demeanor suggests. He knows he is venturing into the heart of the ideological enemy, a regime that Germany has spent years denouncing. However, Hitler has made his decision, and Ribbentrop relishes the dramatic impact of sudden reversals. He believes history is made by those bold enough to transform enemies into allies overnight. The Condor takes to the air, its propellers churning. Berlin recedes into the darkness below. At cruising altitude, the engines hum with a steady, rhythmic pulse. Inside the cabin, a German aide unfolds a map of Poland, tracing a pencil line along the Neru, Vistula, San rivers. This line represents a proposed division of Poland outlined in the secret protocol, a thin stroke on paper about to become a destructive plow across the land. Simultaneously in Moscow, preparations are underway in the Georgievsky Hall. Tables are draped in red cloth, and glasses are meticulously arranged in neat rows. In a nearby waiting office, a young typist named Anya, a fictional character, frantically types the draft agreement in both Russian and German. Her hands ache from switching between two languages she never imagined seeing side by side. She pauses for a brief moment, her gaze falling on a photograph of her father in an old uniform, a casualty of the Civil War. She touches the photo, then continues typing. She doesn't fully comprehend the implications of the document, but she senses that something momentous is shifting beneath everyone's feet. Outside the Kremlin, Ceremonial 76. 2mm guns of the Honor Guard stand silently on the parade ground. They are capable of firing beyond 13 kilometers, but tonight they remain silent. The crews are merely polishing the barrels in anticipation of tomorrow's arrival. The significance of calibers and ranges feels strangely dissonant in an event devoid of gunfire, yet poised to ignite millions of guns. At the Soviet General Staff, officers pour over reports on Western defenses, identifying weaknesses in rail capacity, ammunition storage, and field fortifications that, in some areas, are only a few meters deep, lacking any secondary defensive lines, as documented in various sources regarding military preparedness in 1939. These men will not be present in the treaty room, but the treaty will dictate where they will be digging next. On August 22nd, Molotov receives confirmation. Ribbentrop will arrive in Moscow on the evening of August 23rd. He proceeds directly to Stalin's office. Stalin looks at him, offering a subtle nod, his composure unwavering, as if he has simply received a routine weather report. Yet, the grip on his pipe tightens almost imperceptibly. The first critical turning point is reached. Germany is sprinting toward war, while the USSR is seeking to buy time and establish a buffer zone, and the West remains mired in procedural delays and crippling distrust. No shots have been fired, but the map has already begun to change. The night of August 23rd approaches, the air thick with tension. The Kremlin doors will open for a handshake that will stun Europe. And when those doors open, no one within can feign ignorance of the sound of war echoing down the corridor. August 23rd, 1939, 7:42 p.m., central Moscow airfield. The sky is overcast, the damp air hanging heavy like a shroud. A light wind carries the scent of fuel and damp earth toward the runway lights. Germany's four-engine Condor lowers its landing gear, touching down with a slight jolt. Floodlights illuminate the black fuselage. The door opens and Ribbentrop emerges, his long coat brushing against the steps. He is not greeted with a formal ceremony. Cars are waiting, and the motorcade speeds through the darkened streets of Moscow, the city holding its breath. They proceed directly to the Kremlin. At the Spa Sky Gate, the NKVD guards salute precisely according to protocol, their weapons at the ready, but the route ahead is clear and smooth. August 23rd, 1939, 9:58 p.m., Georgievsky Hall. Chandeliers cast a warm, golden light upon the red-draped tables. The two delegations face each other. In front of each participant sit thin crystal glasses, fountain pens, and the bilingual documents. Molotov sits stiffly, his face an impassive mask. Ribbentrop smiles with excessive enthusiasm. Stalin enters last through a side door, wearing a plain green tunic rather than a grand uniform. Yet his presence instantly commands a room. The public text of the agreement is read swiftly. A 10-year non-aggression pact, neutrality if either nation becomes embroiled in war with a third power, and no alliance is directed against the other. Everything appears perfectly legal. But the real shock lies hidden on another page. Molotov slides forward a thin packet containing the secret additional protocol. Ribbentrop leans in to read, his expression shifting. The protocol divides spheres of influence. Poland is partitioned along the Neru, Vistula, San rivers. Estonia, Latvia, Finland, and Bessarabia fall within the Soviet sphere. Most of Lithuania goes to Germany, a decision later revised by the September 28 Accord. Place names are treated as mere data points, devoid of any human context. There is no mention of people or blood. Stalin puffs on his pipe, fixing Ribbentrop with a steady gaze. We understand each other. Ribbentrop raises his glass. To German-Soviet friendship, Stalin responds in kind. Cameras flash, capturing the moment for posterity. Stalin and Ribbentrop shaking hands beneath the hammer and sickle and the swastika, an image that will reverberate across the world like a thunderclap. In a corner, Anya, a fictional character, a young typist, stands ready with a backup machine. She hears the scratching of pens as the signatures are applied. Molotov's hand is firm and steady, while Ribbentrop's hand trembles momentarily before regaining its composure. As the ink dries, she understands a simple truth. Paper may be silent, but it has just irrevocably altered the course of Europe. August 23, 1939, 11:15 p.m. The signatures are complete. Vodka and champagne flow freely. Stalin jokes about British diplomats, and Ribbentrop laughs loudly. They drink like men closing a lucrative business deal. In the corridor outside, the NKVD guards remain motionless, like statues. Beyond the Kremlin walls, the mist continues to fall. No gunfire is heard, but gunfire has already been set in motion by 3 dots on a map. News of the pact spreads rapidly near midnight. Berlin broadcasts the news immediately, followed by Moscow. Paris and London are stunned. They have believed that the USSR was the last bulwark against Hitler. Now, that bulwark has become the door handle for him. 8 days later, September 1st, 1939, 4:45 a.m., Westerplatte, Gdansk. Early fog hangs in the air, and a cold sea wind whips across the sand and pines. The German battleship Schleswig-Holstein lies ominously in the bay, its massive 280mm guns trained on Polish depots. A 280mm naval shell weighs hundreds of kilograms and can travel tens of kilometers. The ship unleashes its opening salvo. The ground shakes violently. The war has begun. Germany's blitzkrieg surges into Poland from the west. Polish troops fight valiantly, but are overwhelmed by German air power and armor. Poland's 37mm Bofors anti-tank guns are capable of destroying panzers at close range, but there are too few of them spread across the vast front. Each day, defensive lines collapse, falling back dozens of kilometers. On a dusty road in Mazovia, a Polish sergeant opens a letter from his wife on the hood of a truck. Reading it quickly, he barely finishes folding the letter when an air raid siren pierces the air. He shoves the letter into his cap and dives into a shallow trench, less than a meter deep, the sand barely compacted. The trench cannot protect him from a 50 kilograms bomb, but it can shield him from fear for a few precious seconds. September 17, 1939, 5 a.m., eastern Polish borderlands near Polsey. White mist blankets the marshlands. There are no shells yet, but the rumble of engines grows louder. The Red Army crosses the border. There is no declaration of war, no warning. They advance precisely according to the secret protocol. The Soviet offensive is massive, roughly 600,000 to 800,000 troops, nearly 5,000 guns, over 4,700 tanks, and more than 3,000 aircraft. Poland, already battling Germany in the west, is now struck again in the east. 2 blades converge. Near Lwow, a Polish captain orders a retreat across a wooden bridge, only to see Soviet tanks appear. He freezes, unable to comprehend why the enemy of my enemy is now here. A soldier beside him asks, "Do we fire?" The captain shakes his head, his command dying in his throat. The decision is no longer his to make. The Eastern campaign is short-lived because Poland is exhausted and crushed from both sides. Official Soviet losses list a few thousand killed or missing. Polish losses in the East amount to several thousand dead and hundreds of thousands captured, although standard tallies vary by source. But even more devastating than the casualties is the psychological blow. Poland is erased from a map by a handshake signed in advance. The second turning point is reached. A document drafted in the Kremlin becomes 2 converging armies on the ground. The world witnesses ideology fold like paper when survival interests take precedence. Late September at Brest-Litovsk, German and Soviet troops parade together, then withdraw to the border they had predetermined. This brief moment of cooperation feels colder than gunfire, signaling that Europe has no established rules left to rely on. September 28, 1939, 2:03 a.m., the Kremlin, Moscow. Outside, early autumn rain lashes against the windows and a cold wind sweeps through the stone courtyards. Inside, a fresh map lies under the yellow light. A new border has been adjusted after the invasion of Poland. It is called the Boundary and Friendship Treaty, a sequel to the August Handshake. Germany retains control of central western Poland, while the USSR takes the larger eastern half, extending to near the old Curzon line. Lithuania is shifted into the Soviet sphere in exchange for a small strip of land ceded to Germany. Molotov signs again. The ink dries. On some distant riverbank, Polish guards have become prisoners. Maps don't shout, but this one is growing teeth. Stalin studies a narrow Vistula Sen line, a cut into the paper like a knife. He does not smile. He looks beyond it. For him, the pact represents time and a buffer zone, pushing the Soviet frontier westward by 100 kilometers, placing cities like Minsk, Kiev, and Leningrad farther from German guns. He believes he has purchased a living shield. But that shield also serves as a warning. Germany now stands at the door. At a small station near Brest-Litovsk that month, Anya, a fictional character, receives a new assignment, typing rail manifests for grain, oil, and ores bound for Germany. The trade agreements tied to the pact fuel the German war industry in the West, as noted by numerous historical sources. She stares at tonnage numbers that seem endless. She doesn't fully grasp the political complexities, but she understands that she is witnessing war's bloodstream flowing backward along the rails. From October 1939 onward, the USSR begins to consolidate the influence zones promised in the secret protocol. Estonia, Latvia, and Lithuania are pressured into signing base treaties. By the summer of 1940, the Red Army occupies them outright, installs new governments, and annexes them. In Vilnius, a Lithuanian family pins a wedding photo to a newly painted wall, attempting to maintain a semblance of normalcy. Outside, tanks rumble past, their tracks grinding against the stone. The rhythm of civilian life is replaced by the tempo of tank treads. In November 1939, Stalin turns his attention north, demanding Finnish territory and bases to protect Leningrad. Finland refuses. The Red Army invades and the Winter War begins. Karelia freezes, pine forests darken, and temperatures plummet below -20 degrees Celsius. Soviet forces are massive, equipped with 122 to 152 millimeters artillery and numerous T-26 and BT tanks. But they struggle to advance through the snow-choked forests, fighting as if they were simply chopping through water. Finland employs Madi tactics, cutting Soviet columns apart, using snipers, burning vehicles, and turning the war into a war of attrition, according to historical accounts. Soviet losses during that winter, often estimated in the hundreds of thousands, illustrate the cost of a shaky sphere of influence, with exact totals varying depending on the source. On a snow-covered road near Suomussalmi, a Soviet squad digs foxholes to chest depth as the wind slices like a blade. A young soldier pulls out a photo of his mother from inside his coat, wiping the frost off her hair in the picture. He doesn't understand why he's been thrown into this frozen forest after a handshake in Moscow. He only knows that he must survive the night. At the same time in the south, the USSR occupies Bessarabia and northern Bukovina from Romania in the summer of 1940. Bessarabia falls within the Soviet sphere, but Bukovina lies beyond it, according to some sources. Boundaries continue to shift. The colors on a map of Eastern Europe change without the consent of those who live there. While Stalin amasses buffers, Hitler devours Western Europe. France collapses, and Britain is battered from the air. The continental balance of power shifts dramatically in Germany's favor. The August Pact has provided Hitler with what he needed, a free hand in the east to strike in the west. Then, the handshake begins to sour. Soviet freight trains continue to roll toward Germany, but the Wehrmacht is secretly drawing a different map. By the spring of 1941, German assembly areas in occupied Poland are bristling with armor and guns pointing east. Barbarossa is being prepared as a backward slash. June 22nd, 1941, 3:15 a.m., the Bug River near Brest. The summer dawn is misty, the grass wet, and the river tranquil. Suddenly, German artillery erupts in a massive barrage. 105 and 150 millimeters guns unleash dense opening salvos, with 105 millimeters batteries firing approximately 4 to 6 rounds per minute, creating a devastating net of explosions over the border posts. The explosions tear apart the buffer zone that Stalin believed he had secured with signatures. Inside a frontier bunker, a Soviet officer grabs a telephone. It's dead. He switches on the radio. Only static and thunder. He peers through a firing slit and sees German infantry pouring across the bridges. In that instant, he understands. The pact died long before this barrage. Today, it is simply being officially buried. The reversal is complete. The Molotov-Ribbentrop Pact was a diplomatic coup for both regimes, but now it is a minefield. Stalin gained land but inadvertently fueled German strength with Soviet resources. Hitler used neutrality to crush the West, then turned to strike the USSR at his chosen moment. The strategic consequences are as clear as the 1939-41 map. Poland is erased and partitioned. The Baltic states vanish as independent entities. Soviet borders are pushed westward, northward, and southward, and world war erupts on Hitler's preferred schedule. Without the pact, Hitler would have been forced to gamble on a two-front war. Without it, Stalin could not have expanded his buffers so rapidly in 1939-40. Here, the short-term interests of two dictators plunge Europe into long-term bloodshed. The pact's legacy extends far beyond the battlefield. It lives on in memory and doctrine. In 1989, the USSR officially acknowledged the existence of the secret protocols after decades of denial, and the Baltic human chain protests surged toward independence, as noted in many post-war historical analyses. The 1939 Handshake serves as a stark reminder that great powers can carve up smaller states with ink, then demand history as justification. Anya will remember the night of August 23rd as a night of endless typing. Millions of other lives in Poland, the Baltics, Finland, Ukraine, and Belarus carry the pact as a scar etched into family lines, a treaty that did not just unleash war, but also taught Europe that security cannot be built on maps that erase people.